A judge deciding tonight whether former state senator Philip Moran will remain behind bars until his criminal trial. In court today, the Hancock County supervisor, who the FBI says accused Moran of threatening to kill people, taking the stand. Noah Noble live outside the Gulfport courthouse right now with the very latest on what happened.
Prosecutors want Philip Moran to stay locked up because they believe he is a threat, not just to the community, but to anyone involved in this case. Why? Because Philip Moran told Hancock County Supervisor Bo Ladner that he might kill people. That was revealed in court yesterday when an FBI agent testified about an interview with Ladner. But today in court, Ladner dismissed the threat, saying Philip Moran was just blowing off steam, and he doesn't believe his longtime friend would actually go as far as to kill anybody. And Ladner emphasized he never reached out to the FBI, and he's really not quite sure how the federal agents found out about this conversation he had with Philip Moran. Now, when prosecutors questioned Ladner admitted he can't rule the possibility out, especially given the embarrassment from the criminal case against Moran and his son, convicted sex offender Alan Moran. But then came the judge's ruling. While there is not enough evidence to revoke Philip Moran's bond, he will have to pay an additional $75,000 in surety and be fitted with a GPS monitoring device. Both Morans were taken back to the Hancock County Jail. The elder Moran will have to pay the bond and get the tracker installed before he can be released. Both Morans are still set for that criminal trial next week for the bribery and conspiracy charges against them. As a reminder, 2 co-defendants also indicted on those charges have now pled guilty and have agreed to testify against the Morans. Live in Gulfport, I'm Noah Noble for WLOX News Now.